Raiders have officially requested a head coaching interview with Patriots offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels. According to Adam Schefter, McDaniels is now officially interviewing for the Raiders job. So this is now no longer smoke. This is fire, right? He is officially getting interviewed by the Raiders for that GM job or that coaching job. Ziegler still in play there as the GM. So this might be coming together in Vegas for Josh McDaniels, but nothing official yet, of course, in terms of the hiring process. But McDaniels officially interviewing with the Raiders. Two things that we could kind of take this first, your reaction to that, Alex, and then second, I guess we can talk about some potential replacements if that does come to that.
Yeah. So he was putting a staff together before he interviewed. Like, I'm just confused of the timeline because
Right.
he was a favorite on Tuesday. Like, this is all backwards. He
Yeah.
was a favorite on Tuesday, and then he was nearly out of the running on Wednesday. And now on Thursday, they put in a request to interview. And like, I know conversations happen behind the scenes. I get that. But that's a weird timeline. It's
Yes.
a little weird. It's kind of weird. So I don't know what the hell's going on there. I don't know. Maybe the Raiders have somebody else that they want. Maybe whoever. Okay, so let tinfoil hats on here, right? I'm going to Felger and Maz this.
Right.
Let me put this all together, having just heard this. Josh McDaniels is the favorite. All of a
Yes.
sudden, somebody leaps him as the favorite. Now,
Right.
and this was all done behind the scenes, all smoke and mirrors. For the first time, the Raiders become public about McDaniels. Here's what I think happened. Josh McDaniels, candidate. He's candidate. He's not the favorite candidate. He's a candidate.
Right.
They kind of get his hopes up a little bit. The guy they really want, they kind of let that be known privately yesterday. And that's where the report comes in that McDaniels is out of the running. But now maybe the guy they want doesn't want the Raiders.
Right.
Maybe he wants Miami. Maybe he wants New York. So this is the Raiders saying, all right, well, we'll go with Josh then. We don't need you. We'll go get McDaniels. So I wonder if this is posturing by the Raiders to get their own person. And the chat's right. It's Bill O'Brien if McDaniels leaves.
So I really think that this is about the GM search more than it is about the coaching search. I think Dave Ziegler is a real favorite or a real potential candidate there. And my gut feeling on it is that if Dave Ziegler gets hired to be the general manager of the Raiders, that he's going to want to bring Josh McDaniels with him. So I wonder if this is the first step of the Raiders saying Ziegler is essentially telling us that this is a package deal, right? If we hire him, we're hiring Josh. And we got to at least interview Josh before we get to that decision on Ziegler to see if we like this as our brain trust, as our battery moving forward at the top of the organization. Because if we don't, then we're out on everybody Patriots, right? We're out on Ziegler, we're out on Mayo, we're out on McDaniels. So I think in a lot of ways, this is as much about the general manager spot with the Raiders as it is about the head coaching vacancy with Las Vegas. So very, very interesting, though. This was through back channels, a lot of chatter. Don't sleep on Josh McDaniels as a head coaching candidate for the Raiders now. They have officially made it public that they will be interviewing Josh McDaniels. You mentioned Bill O'Brien. How do you feel about this for Mac Jones' development? Because that's my biggest concern with all of this is that I truly would be worried about Mac having too many offensive coordinators in the early part of his career. That is a very quick way to ruin a young quarterback is by changing the voice in the headset every single season and having a ton of turnover there. And when I look at Bill O'Brien, I think it's a great idea from a stylistic perspective, right? He can bring some Alabama stuff with him, bring some college schemes to update the system a little bit, and he can go back to that 2011, 2010 offense that he coordinated, not Josh McDaniels. That was Bill O'Brien that coordinated the Gronk and Hernandez 2 tight end offense. There's a lot of reasons why Bill O'Brien makes a ton of sense. The thing that worries me about Bill O'Brien is that he's going to want to be a head coach again soon here someday, maybe even in 2023, whether it's in college or it's in the pros. O'Brien has talked multiple times about wanting to be a head coach. So if you change it again on Mac, that really means that you're going to have 3 coordinators in Josh McDaniels and Mac Jones's first 3 seasons in the NFL. And that worries me. But maybe the Bill O'Brien thing is a bridge to Troy Brown or is a bridge to somebody already on the staff. I know Joe Judge has had some rumors about he would have been the next guy as the offensive coordinator for the Patriots if Josh McDaniels had taken the Colts job. So maybe they bring Judge back in the building and get him working with Mac a little bit behind the scenes, and then eventually transition it after Bill O'Brien were to leave. But the O'Brien thing worries me because of the head coaching interest. And I think that that's going to be a big thing for them moving forward.
Yeah, I think I'd feel better about it, like you said, if they had somebody in the pipeline, and maybe that is Troy Brown. He's probably the closest. Maybe this kind of gets them in gear, like you said, of you go from Bill O'Brien to another guy. I think you got to keep it in the pipeline with Mac, and they might not be able to do that this year. I know Bill O'Brien is very familiar to the organization, but he hasn't been here with Mac, right? And he wasn't at Alabama with Mac. This was his first year at Alabama, right? Or do I have my timeline off?
Correct.
Right. So they've never worked together. They, at least not officially. So yeah, they've never worked together. So you hope you can go from O'Brien to Troy Brown, or you bring in some hot shot quarterbacks coach, with O'Brien, and then that guy's kind of slated to take over next year if and when O'Brien leaves. I think that's potentially a way to go with it. So yeah, I'm more concerned about losing Ziegler, honestly. The other thing is with this, if it's O'Brien, they're going to take Mechir Williams in the first round. Doesn't it feel like it?
I would think so. You did mention that Mac and Bill O'Brien worked together during that transition. You're right about that. If I remember correctly, Mac was actually teaching Bill O'Brien the Alabama playbook when Bill O'Brien was taking over for Steve Sarkisian. So there is some overlap there.
He was I don't think he ever coordinated, because his first year at Bama was 2021, right? Yeah. So Mac taught him the playbook on his way out. I meant they never worked together in that sense.
Correct. They never worked together in a game on the season.
If Texas would just and there's a million reasons why they won't do this. There's he just signed a massive deal. They'd owe him like half of the state's GDP or whatever. But man, if Texas would fire Steve Sarkisian, who was horrible in his first year at Texas, dreadful in his first year at Texas. You think the Patriots collapse at the end of the season was bad. Texas lost their last 7. They lost to Kansas. I know it's not a college football podcast. I can already hear you groaning. But
no, it's okay.
Man, if they could just weed Sarkisian out of Texas somehow, that'd be great. But yeah, Bill O'Brien wouldn't be bad.
I think that's the way to go if they can make that happen. I do worry about the 3 coordinators in 3 years for Mac Jones being potentially the case if they do hire O'Brien. But we'll see. Look, I think in a lot of ways, losing McDaniels wouldn't be terrible to the overall philosophy of the offense, because there's no doubt about it. First of all, in the chat, Steve Sarkisian was not terrible for the Atlanta Falcons. There
was that one season where they threw the ball to Julio Jones twice in the red zone. He couldn't figure it out in the red zone. He could not figure it out in the red zone. He still can't.
But
he couldn't.
Matt Ryan won an MVP with Steve Sarkisian as his play caller. You realize that, right?
Wasn't it Shanahan?
No.
Are you sure about that? It was Shanahan.
Okay, maybe the year after that was Sarkisian. Okay,
because he won it 28-3. He won it the 28-3 year, right? Yeah.
Right.
No, Steve Sarkisian. The one thing about Steve Sarkisian, once the ball gets inside the 20, he has no freaking idea what is going on. That is his biggest weakness.
So Ian Rappaport is claiming from the ownership level that Mark Davis has had his eye on Josh McDaniels for a while. And this is where all the back channels and this is where all the whispers have formed with the Raiders head coaching vacancy.
Sark replaced Shanahan, so yeah.
Continue. You're right. The MVP season was Kyle Shanahan. I messed that up. All right, so this thing's real with the Raiders and Josh McDaniels. We'll continue to monitor that. Bill O'Brien's one name. We were talking a little bit there about Sark. It's kind of hard pressed to find another name that makes a lot of sense unless they go completely outside the box here with this OC hire or they promote from within. I think Troy Brown has a chance.
Can I throw one out there?
Yes.
A lot of former Patriots quarterbacks have had success now as offensive coordinators. There's one former Patriots quarterback very familiar with the system that may not have a job soon.
Are you going with this, or I think you're going with this?
I mean, I'm kidding, but yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you picked up on the joke there. No, in all honesty, though, I'd love to see them find, I know most of these guys are already in OC roles, but maybe, a chance to work with Mac or something. Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah.
Zach Robinson. Zach Robinson actually might be a receivers coach right now. Zach Robinson would be a guy who would be interesting.
Yeah.
Even I can't. Rohan Davies coaching at the college level right now, and
Yeah.
he's kind of a quarterback specialist. We have I can't do names this week. The former quarterback we have on
Tim Jenkins.
Tim. He kind of started out like Tim, and I think he's gotten into some coaching a little bit. So I would just go through the Rolodex of Brady's backups and see if somebody
Right.
like I wouldn't hate that. I want to check on Zach Robinson because I know he's kind of been a hot name recently, and I don't think he's an OC yet. I think he's he's the assistant quarterbacks coach for the Rams.
It's not a bad one.
Wouldn't be a bad option. Zach Robinson would be if they're going to go external, and they kind of need to run that sort of offense a little bit more, right?
You would hate if Zach Robinson was the play caller, though.
It's the kind of offense they need to run.
He is somebody that is obviously one of the founding fathers from a brain trust standpoint of PFF, right? He worked a lot with Pro Football Focus in their beginning years with their grading, with their formulas, with their analytics. I think if a guy like Zach Robinson were to be, and he was a former quarterback, I think if a guy like Zach Robinson is the coordinator here, they're throwing the ball 65% of the time. I think he's going to bring in a Brandon Staley-ish approach to the offense where he's saying we need to be more modern. We need to throw the ball.
No, because
go that direction.
He's McVay's tree, and they run the ball. They do it differently, but McVay, Shanahan, they run the ball.
My concern what my concern is with changing it to a McVay style offense, right? It's not that it doesn't work. Clearly it works.
Right.
The issue is that you're looking for very, very different players. Like if you're running outside zone all the time, Mike Onwenu doesn't have a role in an outside zone scheme, right? He's
right.
He's too slow. A Trent Brown right. Thing. It's not, if you're trying to run outside a wide zone system, you need to get athletic offensive linemen. You need to get fast offensive linemen. You need to get guys that can flow side to side. These big running backs too, Damian Harris or Ramondre Stevenson, forget about that, right? You need to get,
I don't know about that.
Stars. No, you can't get guys that run that slow going.
Todd Gurley ran that system.
Todd Gurley was a track star. Todd Gurley could fly. You need to get guys that get downhill. Like we're talking about Raheem Mostert, Elijah Mitchell. Those are the types of players that you want in that type of system.
I would say, and look, I kind of just pulled that name off the top of my head, and these are valid.
No, I was more talking about it from the wide zone perspective because I do think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to point to it and say, let's tab a guy from the Shanahan tree or from the McVay tree. And
I'm doing from the Brady backup tree is how I'm doing this. But okay. I think a lot of those guys, and there's a piece by Benjamin Solak the other day who kind of highlighted this.
Yeah.
I think a lot of those guys really just get off on the idea that they're innovating the game. I think a lot of those guys are just really into the idea, not necessarily buying into that wide zone offense, but the idea they're doing something new. So I wonder, and we're talking wide hypotheticals here.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could go to Zach Robinson and say, we're not trying to run the Shanahan McVay offense.
Yeah.
We want you to come up with something brand new. We want you to figure out a way to marry some of those concepts to our more traditional approach. Because that's ultimately what they should be trying to do anyway. So he'll be an interesting name.
Yeah. I do also wonder if a guy like Joe Brady gets into this. Right now,
you would love that.
Oh, I would love that. But the issue with Joe Brady in Carolina was that Matt Rule wanted to run the football. Right? Matt Rule had no pun intended. Matt Rule had a rule that the Panthers had to run the ball 20 times a game at least. They had to hit that 20 times a game number, and it drove Joe Brady absolutely nuts. But you look at some of the things that Joe Brady did. I wouldn't necessarily say with Carolina because I think his hands were tied behind his back in terms of creative juices and what Matt Rule actually would let him do in the passing game. You look at what he was doing at LSU with Burrow, and that definitely gets you more excited, right? You have a lot of the empty stuff, a lot of 5 wide, a lot of RPO college type schemes, a lot going on there that I think is really potentially could work here with Mac Jones, get the football out of his hands, space and spread the field. Now you got to go out and get some guys that can run, obviously, that can get up the field and can create plays down the field for that kind of offense. And that, most importantly, can get open quickly in the short passing game because he's probably going to run a lot of 5 and 6 man protections. So you're not going to have a whole lot of time. to stand there in the pocket and throw. But the Patriots do have the offensive line to make that hold up. So in a lot of ways, I love Joe Brady as well. I like the idea of the Brady backup. I wish Kevin O'Connell was somebody that, he's already.
He's also that same scheme, isn't he?
Well, yes and no. I mean, he's been in a couple different places. He started with the Washington football team, right? And then he's migrated over. Jay Gruden with the Washington football team. I think he was still with Jay Gruden was West Coast, right? Which is still similar to the wide zone scheme. It's still West Coast verbiage, and it's the same verbiage, but it wasn't quite as heavy on the misdirection, play action, rollout type of stuff that they do in San Francisco or with the Rams. It's a really interesting conversation because there's no obvious candidate in terms of who would replace Josh McDaniels currently on the staff. I saw Chad O'Shea mentioned in a couple places as well. I believe he's still in Cleveland on the Cleveland staff. Obviously got fired once before, and
he's the wide receivers coach and passing game coordinator for the
Browns.
This is his current job.
Yes. So that's another one.
And you know what? A guy with experience with wide receivers, guy who I believe he was the wide receivers coach. He was the wide. Well, no, I know it was here, but he was the wide receivers coach who developed Julian Edelman. So in a year where you're going to need wide receivers, him and Troy Brown working with whoever they draft, whoever they bring in. Yeah, I don't hate that at all. Chad O'Shea is a really interesting name.
So I also wanted to look at this Raiders thing, and then we're going to get back to the point of the show, the offseason needs. But one last thing, I've been mentioning Ziegler a lot. It really feels like this domino that could fall on the Patriots right now is that Ziegler is the GM hire with the Raiders too. And that one I think is even bigger in a lot of ways than McDaniels, just because the Patriots have had a lot of brain power sucked from that front office over the last couple of seasons, and they've had a lot of coaching power sucked from the coaching staff as well. And it almost gets to the point with guys like Joe Judge and with Brian Flores that even if it's a lot of voices in the room, you almost need to tool some of it, right? Like there's a lot of it gone though, Alex. Like you can talk about Dante Scarnecchia too on the coaching staff gone, and now Ziegler's gone from the year after Caserio leaves. So Elliot Wolf would probably be a very good candidate there to potentially replace Dave Ziegler here in the short term. There are some lower level scouts that the Patriots are high on. I'm blanking on his name, but their director of
Matt Groh, I think, is the big one, right?
Yeah. Is he the director of college scouting? I think so.
College scouting coordinator is his official title.
Yeah. Matt Groh has been somebody that the team has been high on. Patriots always have a good pipeline of scouts and front office execs that they like. And obviously Belichick's the general manager anyways. But Ziegler leaving as well seemed to steady the ship a little bit in the draft, certainly, I would say, over the last couple of years. And that one would be a big blow, too. So it looks like if McDaniels is legitimately getting interviewed by the Raiders, which is what Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport are reporting at this point, that the Raiders are at least very, very high on Ziegler as well. And I would imagine that if McDaniels is getting the job, then so is Ziegler and vice versa.
Right. Well, and the other thing that might do is, who's he going to bring in to run the defense? Gerard Mayo.
Right.
Doesn't it feel like Mayo would be a candidate there? And then maybe that's where you get it. We talked about it before. Brian Flores perhaps coming back into the picture.
That's a really good point.
Get the band back together. You get Brian Flores on defense, Bill O'Brien on offense, Joe Judge on special teams, Chad O'Shea doing the wide receiver. You get the whole bit. Let's get the band back together, baby. It's time.
I didn't even think of that. Gerard Mayo, because he could officially get the title with the Raiders of the defensive
probably
coordinator.
A nice little pay bump too.
Right. Yeah, that's not a terrible theory we got working there. So ideal scenario for the Patriots here, Alex, if Josh McDaniels does get the job, I think that the ideal scenario is that he brings Gerard Mayo with him. Right? No offense to Gerard Mayo, but I think
that's a win-win for everybody. Gerard Mayo gets to do his own thing.
There's clearly some tension there between Mayo and Steve, and it seems like that would be for the best. And maybe that does open the door for Brian Flores to come back if he doesn't get a job. All of this really makes a lot of sense, for the Raiders, though. So that this could come together, and that's maybe the good news here for the Patriots. But first and foremost, most important thing is keeping things consistent for Mac Jones. You don't want to be completely reinventing the wheel year after year after year for Mac going forward. All right, let's get back to the offseason needs. We'll continue to monitor this Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler, and the entire Raiders coaching search. Just wanted to break in there with the breaking news there.